Compared to cars, motorcycles burn through tires fast, and paying a shop $50 or more per wheel to swap rubber can really add up. So what's it take to install tires at home? I'll show you how to DIY a tubeless tire change so you can save money and time. Let's open up the shop manual. This episode of the Shop Manual is powered by DuraBoost batteries. Get 10% off your DuraBoost purchase at RevZilla.com with discount code 10OFF_TSM. The original and cheapest way to change your tires is with tire irons. To swap rubber the old school way, you're gonna need at least 2 tire irons, the longer the better, a valve core remover, some Windex or a 50-50 mix of water and dish soap, and access to compressed air. It's also a good idea to use a set of rim protectors to keep your paint pretty, and a carpet square and some 2x4s are useful as a work surface down on the ground. And if you want to balance the wheel, which some people consider optional, but I certainly endorse, you're going to need a balance stand and some wheel weights. In order to change your tire, you do need to get the wheel off the bike, and we have covered that before, so I'm not going to detail it here, but what I will do is put a link to those videos down in the description. So I'm working on the carpet square here, which is nice for my knees. It's also good to help protect the rim. And if you're working on the front wheel where the rotors might project past the edge of the tire, that's where your 2x4s come in. You can put those under the wheel to keep your disc from touching the ground. If you're working on the rear wheel, like I am here, you definitely want to remove the sprocket carrier. Your knuckles will thank you. Now, we need to deflate the tire, and you could just jam your finger into the valve core or screwdriver or whatever. The best course of action is to use a valve core remover because you actually are gonna be flexing on the tire and you want air to be able to leave the tire as you're doing that. So if you leave the valve core in, obviously that's not an option. So the next step is getting the bead of the tire off the shoulder of the rim and pushed down into what's called the drop center of the rim. And that's the trough that runs around the circumference of the wheel and allows the whole tire changing process to work. Now, there's a bunch of ways you can do this. You can use a dedicated bead breaker. You can use the side stand of another motorcycle. You can even use a big C-clamp and some blocks of wood. But what I'm going to do is use my Bead Pros, which have this built-in fulcrum device that you can use to break the bead off the wheel. So, gonna lubricate the tire. We're using our 50-50 mix of dish soap and water. I did say you could use Windex, but this is definitely better. And for tire lube, use it often and use it liberally. And then get your tire irons and start working them under the edge of the rim. Going back and forth over the same section, pushing it off. So once you get a little bit of a section off like this with your tire irons, you can then literally just push it off by hand. Okay, so that is one bead broken, but we gotta do the other side. So flip the tire over and do it again. And this wheel is gonna rock. So I am going to put my blocks of wood under here just to stabilize it. Phase 1 of tire change is complete. We have both beads broken. Now what we need to do is get one of those beads up and over the rim. I'm actually gonna flip this wheel back over because this next step takes some muscle and I don't wanna be rocking the wheel around on those 2x4s. To get this tire off, we've gotta get the bead up and over the edge of the rim. So take your Bead Pros and slide them in across from you, about 6 to 8 inches apart. The bead has a steel cable in it, so that sucker is not going to stretch. The only way to get this bead up and over the rim is if this bead is pushed down in the drop center. That's the only way to get enough slack for this to happen. So what I will do is I will use my knee, just trying to keep my rim shields in place because they do want to pop out. Use my knee to push the tire down into the drop center. And then lever one tire iron over and they're gonna pop out and it's frustrating. And then another, okay. It's honestly that first bite that's the hardest with tire removal. If you're gonna be tempted to take big bites, please try and take small ones. All right,
And once you've got a little bit, there you go. The tire is just gonna pop off and over the rim. We've got one bead off, but now we need to get the second bead off over the same side of the rim. Put your rim protector in, slide your tire iron into place, push it up and over. And once you get it past the edge of the rim, you can usually use your knee again to work it off. I'm gonna be able to do with just my knee. And there we go. Mildly sweaty, mildly frustrated, very dirty already, but we've got the old tire off the rim. You ought to be able to recycle that old tire at an auto parts store or a motorcycle store, or maybe even your local landfill, but do not just throw it in a dumpster. In any case, on to the new rubber. And one thing you can do to make your life easier is heat this sucker up so that it is more pliable. So what you can do is you can set it out in the sun at the beginning of the process, or if it's cold out or you don't have any sun, you can just lay a hairdryer inside the tire for 10 or 15 minutes. Now, the step isn't necessary, but given how much effort it is to do a manual tire change, you're gonna want all the help you can get. So with your new tire, there's two things you need to look for. One is the paint dot, which represents the lightest part of the tire. And you're gonna want to align that with the valve stem on your rim, which is supposed to be the heaviest part of the rim. So that basically allows you to put less weight on it later when you balance it. The other thing that frankly is more important is the orientation arrow. You want to double, triple, quadruple check that this aligns with the orientation of the wheel, because you are going to be so frustrated if you put that tire on backwards. And believe me, I've done it quite a few times. Once you're absolutely certain of the tire rotation on the rim, you can go ahead and lubricate that first bead, and I'm going to use a rag to keep the soap from getting inside the tire. So you don't really want moisture in there if you can avoid it. And then press the bead over the rim, and usually you can just do this with strength. There we go. Although if it is an especially stiff tire, you might need to use a tire iron. Make sure that dot is aligned with the valve stem. Confirm your rotation one last time, I can't reiterate that enough, and then lubricate the upper bead and push it down into the drop center. And use your knee to pin it. Now take your tire irons and start working the tire over the rim, starting at your knee and working your way out. Those first few bites are going to be pretty easy. Chase them along with your knee to keep the tire down in there, but as you work your way around the tire, it is going to get harder and become a little bit of a hellish game of whack-a-mole, because as you try and push one section of tire over, the opposite is going to try and jump up. So one thing I'm noticing right away is the bead has come back up onto the shoulder of the rim. You really have to keep it down in the drop center, or this process simply doesn't work. Like I said, there's a steel belt in the bead. It does not stretch. It needs to be in the drop center opposite in order to get over. So I'm gonna keep walking my knees over to keep that bead down. Slide these over to protect this gorgeous turquoise paint. Taking little bites, as always. It's so easy to get greedy and try and take big bites. An especially stiff tire might require a third tire iron here. Again, I am going to keep pushing the bead down in to give myself that all-important slack. And now we're getting to where it gets a lot harder. Lots of lube helps. Long tire irons help. Keeping that bead in the drop center helps. Slide this sucker over. Okay, getting down to the wire. Playing the game of whack-a-mole here. There we go. Okay. Hopefully this will be our last bite. Nope. So you're constantly fighting yourself because it's trying to pull up. And I've heard some people say to leave one side of the bead dry so it actually grips the rim, so it's less likely to pull up. I think that's a worthwhile technique, but not the one we're following today. All right, and then that last bit goes on by hand. The tire is on, and the hard part of the process is thankfully behind us. Now, both beads should still be lubricated, but if they're not, go ahead and spray them down again, because what we're gonna do next is reinstall the valve stem and then inflate the tire to push the beads out onto the shoulder of the rim. Use 40 PSI max and be warned when those beads jump into place, they're gonna make two very loud pops. If you've got a stubborn bead that won't pop into place, resist the urge to just put more air in it. What you should do is pull the valve core out, let it deflate, maybe push the bead off a little bit, re-lubricate, and then start over, and hopefully it pops into place. Alternatively, if you've got a tire that is just leaking air and it won't seat and inflate, take the section where it's leaking, turn it toward the ground, and then put your knee in it so that the bottom section gets pressed against the rim and will hold air. So now that this thing is fully seated, we can go about balancing it. Balancing the tire is important because if it's out of balance, it's going to vibrate, which is not good for handling. A lot of modern tires really don't take much weight. Both the wheels and tires have gotten to a point where it's not necessary, but I still always check. And the process is pretty straightforward. You don't need a lot of fancy equipment. I've got this Motion Pro truing stand and some adhesive weights, and the process involves spinning the wheel and waiting for it to settle. This is called static balancing, and it's basically functioning like a pendulum. Whatever settles out to the bottom indicates the heaviest point of the wheel, and you would want to put weight opposite that location until the wheel no longer settles out and swings, but stops randomly, suggesting that it is fully balanced. What I'll do is I'll actually take a piece of tape and mark where it settles, right about there, and then I'll just turn it 90 degrees from that and see if it settles at the same spot. I'm actually gonna spin it past the other way and see if it settles. So you could just let it do its thing and settle out, but time is precious, so I'm trying to move along with the process. So confidently say that this is the heaviest part of the wheel, which means we need to add weight here. So we've got soapy mess all over the rim. This is also a really good opportunity to clean your wheels since you can easily spin them. But I'm doing this specifically so that I can tape some weight on here, and I will temporarily tape weights until I know how much is needed. And then I'll actually peel the adhesive off the back and stick it on permanently. So we're putting this with our mark on the pendulum here. And then I'll put that at 90 degrees and see what happens. So that rate of motion tells me that the initial heavy spot is still the heaviest, but it also tells me that because it's moving so slowly, that we're getting very close to the amount of weight we need. In my preference, if 2 weights is not gonna be enough and 3 weights is gonna be too much, I'm gonna put less weight on the wheel, but we'll go ahead and put a third one on just to see what it does. So it seems like 3 is the right amount. 4 is probably gonna be too much. All right, at this point, I'm happy with 3. I'm happy with how slowly that's rotating. So I will thoroughly clean this section of the rim so that my weights will stick. Put them in place, and then you're good to go. Don't forget to set your tire pressure as per your manual. And again, this is a great opportunity while it's on the stand to spin the whole wheel and clean it thoroughly to get all that soapy, dirty water from the installation process off of it so that your wheel is nice and clean and ready to go. And with that, you are done and probably a little exasperated. Tire irons are certainly a cheap ticket to DIY tire changes. I mean, all in between the levers, the rim shields, and even the balance stand, we're only at about $250 worth of equipment, but it is undeniably a lot of work. Thankfully, tire levers aren't your only option. If you want to sweat less, swear less, and run less risk of scratching your rims, and you're willing to spend about $650, then you could buy a Raboconda street tire changer, which breaks the bead, dismounts the tire, and installs the new rubber a lot faster and a lot easier than tire irons. And unlike other tire changers, it doesn't need to be bolted to the floor. In fact, it's mobile and it packs down for easy storage. Now, you're gonna have to change quite a few tires before the Roboconda pays for itself, but if you factor in the money you're not putting in the swear jar, well, it might amortize faster than you think. Ah! Fuck! I actually hit myself in the face. If all of this effort just seems like too much work, you do have one final option, and that's to pay someone else to do it. If you bring your entire motorcycle to a shop, it is going to be shockingly expensive for them to remove the wheels and then install the tires. So at the very least, I would encourage you to pull the wheels yourself. And if you bought your tires through RevZilla, Cycle Gear, or JMP Cycles, and you bring those tires into your local Cycle Gear shop, they will install them and balance them for half price.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Shop Manual. As I mentioned earlier in the video, we do have articles and videos for how to remove your motorcycle's wheels. I have put those links down in the description, as well as an article I wrote explaining why I think sport touring tires are actually the right tire for the vast majority of street riders. Now, if you like the Shop Manual and you appreciate the information that we are sharing with you on this channel, note that if you buy your tires, your bike parts, or any apparel for yourself from RevZilla, that you are supporting this channel and helping us continue to make this excellent content. So thanks.